Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me. Today, we are going to discuss Rachel Carson's book, Silent Spring. So, and as you can see right there on the cover, it says the classic that launched the environmental movement. So, we're going to talk a little bit about Rachel Carson, a little bit about her book, a little bit about why it's claimed that her book starts the environmental movement of the 1970s, which is a huge fundamental deal for the United States moving forward with environmentalism, with NEPA and the EPA and all that stuff. So maybe you got assigned this book by a professor. Maybe you just saw it at the library, thought it'd be a good read, or maybe you just want to read it for the historical value. So we're going to cover what Silent Spring really means for environmentalism and the environmental movement here. So a lot of people, when you think environmentalism and all that stuff, you immediately go to NEPA and you immediately go to the EPA, which I'll discuss all that and I'll get in depth into all those policies and those regulations in a video later down the road. But for right now, why was Silent Spring such a fundamental role with environmentalism? Because when you look historically into Silent Spring and the environmental movement and stuff, the environmental movement really started in 1866, with the American Society for Cruelty of Animals. You had in 1892, the Sierra Club was formed. You go into 1919, the National Parks Conservation was formed. You see all the way back into the 1800s that, environmentalism was still there. But for some reason, it's credited that Silent Spring and Rachel Carson's what really brought that in. A lot of people give way to Garrett Hardin and say that, the tragedy of the commons was a lot of what really kind of sparked that. But fundamentally, most historians and most environmentalists give credit to Rachel Carson for all this. So with all these past things, you have to think what separated her as a writer from people like John Muir, Leopold, and, all the other great environmental writers that were writing these essays, Thoreau and all that. So one thing that I will say is when you look at what was going on, when you take environmentalism, it's really this forward motion that really started in the 1800s, and everything was just this building block on top of a building block. And so when you look back into post-World War II even, post-World War II, we came back, people had a different respect for the environment. People had a different respect for things. A lot of it was because of the atrocities that they saw in war and the things that they saw over there. And they came back, and leisure time meant a lot. So when you're looking into environmentalism, it really goes into these major components and these major fundamental changes that happen over time. So environmentalism really starts as a religion. So when you look back into the Bible, and when you look back into that, the Bible is described, the wilderness is this place that's this unforgiving and punishable place, but it's also this place that you can go find God and stuff like that. When you look back into the Bible, the wilderness is where, Jesus went and had the encounter with Satan and things like that. So, you have this transition, this religious aspect that the environment and the wilderness out there away from society is completely separated by man. So that transitions into the 1800s and stuff like that, into it's no longer a place to get lost in where evil is and where hardship comes, as talked about in the Bible. But you look at places like, the Tetons and stuff like that, and these protected places like Yellowstone, and you look and they have this awe about them, this value. It's a place where you can go find God, where you can become closer to God with these different places. And that's why, early on with environmental protection and stuff like that, you never saw grasslands being protected. You never saw that. It had to be this God-inspiring almost scenery that just, made you feel small and really put that into there. And when you read a lot of Muir's writing, it really reflects that. Then we kind of transition, you go from this religious aspect and all that, and then you kind of transition into like a post World War II mentality, and it's a huge gap. Keep in mind, it's a very huge gap between, the 1800s and World War II, obviously. But, what ends up happening is people come back, and now that religious aspect has really changed. Now it's no longer about religion and going to find your peace in God and stuff like that. Now it's the nature is connected with the definition of getting away from work, going to be away from work, be away from civilization, being away from all that stuff. So that what you can end up doing essentially is clearing your mind and almost going back to your primitive state, your primitive nature, in a sense. So now with the post World War II, you're looking at that. It's more about leisure time and recreation. So you have that huge fundamental thing that now people are saying it's not about religion preserving these lands and preserving these places and stuff. It's about my escape. It's about escaping my duties of everyday life of society and going out there and just enjoying nature and being completely free in a very real sense. So you look at when that fundamental changes happen. Now you have people that's really starting to fight for the environment, for recreational use. They don't want to see the environment gone, because once the environment's gone, what's going to happen? And it's like Turner states. Turner states, you know, that the American West is gone. It's gone. It's to be no more. Through manifest destiny, we had progressed so far forward that it is completely gone now. And that's one of the things that society really had to come to terms with and really had to define of what is wilderness, what is the environment, what is the nature. And then moving forward, you see this, that once nature becomes recreation, it becomes a place that humanity doesn't belong. Humanity belongs in this society around people, around cities and stuff like that. But when you really look, the environment is very much all around us, all a part of us. You can't go anywhere without seeing, nature in some state of form, in its truest form. So so let's kind of tie this all into Silent Spring then. So Silent Spring really was a fundamental thing, because what was going on during that time was we had the lunar launch. So the 1970s environmental movement was shortly after the lunar launch. So what you're seeing now is we're going to space. We are going to space. We're landing on the moon. We are now being able to see on live television and through pictures and stuff of what the Earth looks like. So for the first time, humanity's looking at this ball just floating in the middle of the dark abyss, and they're saying, "Oh my gosh, look at how fragile we are, how little we are in comparison to things." And it really kind of shaped and turned how society as a whole was really looking at the environment, how we were looking at the earth. And we sat there and said, this is it. This is all we have right here. So what ended up happening was Silent Spring came out. Okay. So, and Silent Spring goes into all these pesticides, and it goes into all this stuff that the government's having these pesticides to remove flights and to remove different viruses, ailments of trees, and invasive species and even unwanted species. And so when you look, and this is what a lot of Rachel Carson talks about, she talks about the use of DDT. To kind of throw it back into World War II, DDT was this huge like godsend in a sense, that it cured and got rid of lice and all this stuff over there. So you're just sitting there seeing, like, for how all the amazing that chemical engineering is doing. We are now able to control the environment through chemicals. We can now take the environment and just really control it and maneuver it in the way we want, by eradicating species that we want to keep and by keeping certain species that we want. So what this means is we are drastically changing the environment to meet human needs, whether it's for agriculture or intrinsic value, or just for any other value you can think of, as long as it's appeasing and pleasing to humanity. So what you end up seeing here is Rachel Carson calls this out. So she's a biologist. So, and she calls this out. And she goes and she says, what we're doing here and how we're controlling nature is not right. Nature is not meant to be controlled like this by humanity. It is not meant to just take and just wield. And, we're sitting here wielding this power. So she brings up the whole DDT matter, and she takes all these scientific essays and these scientific documents and all this stuff. And what she does is she shows and proves that we are killing the earth. We are very literally killing the earth through our chemicals. We're eradicating it. And I'm not going to go, just in case some of the viewers haven't read the book, I'm not going to go, too much into what the book states and stuff like that, because if you haven't read it, you really need to read it. But she takes this complex science that the average person doesn't understand, and she breaks it down into everyday words that now everybody can understand what's going on. Because you have to think of it, Rachel Carson is a very beautiful and very gifted writer. She has a way with words that, nobody else can do. And that's one of the fundamental things here is Rachel Carson really took the science of us humans destroying the earth with chemicals and pesticides, and she took that and put it into plain words and left out the numbers and left out the graphs and the scientific jargon. And so it became a New York Times bestseller, for that reason. And now people were really understanding what was going on. Now it all clicked in for them because of that. So we already had this environmental movement of people being like really cautious, and it was this trance that came through and all that. And then with us going into space and seeing the earth and stuff like that, Rachel Carson's book was the straw that broke the camel's back on this. It was okay, this is for real. We just went up to space. We saw what's going on here, how small we are, how fragile our life is, and how fragile this earth is. And we are destroying it because we are trying to wield it. And it comes into the whole, thing of dominion, and that's what Rachel Carson is really, if you really want to sum up what Rachel Carson is really saying, she is talking about us, the humanity, having too much dominion over the earth. And so she is telling us that we need to really take a step back. And what she's really getting at here is we need to make a transition from dominion of the earth into stewardship of the earth. So, and that's a very fundamental thing that she is trying to state. And in her whole book, that is the key principle. Shifting dominion into stewardship. So what ended up happening is once the book came out, and that was in 1962, you have all these people made the New York Times bestseller list, all that stuff. And what ends up happening is things just start going in a forward motion very rapidly, very rapidly. People understand that you're putting pesticides in our food. You're putting pesticides in the stuff that my children eat. Everything is tainted now because of these chemicals. Everything is very, very corrupted through these chemicals. And the government and these organizations, these pesticide companies are pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing the agenda of more chemicals, more, more. So anyway, Silent Spring becomes this catalyst to get the people in motion and move them. So and this comes to the whole thing of right here of how was this book right here such a huge event in American history and environmental history? Well, it obviously didn't start the environmental movement. So there was movements before that, and there was definitely, needs to conserve land and to protect land and stuff like that for recreational use and all that. But it's this final transition. As I said earlier in the video, we went from the wilderness being wild to this wild place where, you went and evil was there. And it was a religious place. And we made this transition from religion to this transition from being recreation. Well, now we're in a transitional period here in the 1970s of now it is no longer religious and it's no longer recreation. It is about our health. It is about preserving our health. It's about me not getting cancer. It's about my children not getting cancer. It's about us having clean air to breathe so we're not sitting there sick and dying. So that is the fundamental thing right there. Religion has always been debated. Recreation has always been geared towards the middle, upper class, and upper class people. So now we have something here that affects everybody because everybody cares about their health. Nobody wants to die. And that's what we have right here is now people are like, okay, what's going on with our earth right now, what's going on with these chemicals and the environment right now is killing us. And if we don't put a stop to it, my kids are going to die. I'm going to die. All that stuff is coming into play now. So the fact that this book was so easy to read, as I stated earlier, made it that everybody understood this now. Everybody understood what was going on. So though it didn't start an environmental movement, and not necessarily the environmental movement of the 1970s, this book did get the masses of people to come together. Now, when you can go and pull up the video, there's another video on YouTube, and it's about the 1970s first Earth Day. And Walter Cronkite gets on there, and he talks about it, and he says, Earth Day has failed. Earth Day has blatantly failed. He talks about the type of people that were in this movement, and these people were anti-Nixon, which Nixon, for a lot of people, is the fundamental person who started the environmentalism. His administration was the one that got the ball rolling on NEPA and EPA and all that stuff. So, it was all college kids. He states they were majority white, majority, college, and they were all anti-Nixon people. So what you can take is back then it was what you would consider today as the liberals. It was the liberals that were part of this movement, and what the news media was portraying was the conservatives had nothing to do with it. Had nothing to do with it at all. But that's fundamentally wrong because though the Earth Day was deemed as a failure and stuff like that, it affected everybody, and everybody had some sort of role into it. Because when you go to the grocery store, even today, and you look around, you see this non-GMO stuff, you see all this, everything has come from environmentalism, So Earth Day has not failed, and it was not just the liberals that were part of it. It was a huge factor of everything. So, anyway, to summarize, Silent Spring didn't start environmentalism, didn't start the environmental movement. It was the tipping point because, as I stated earlier, environmentalism has been a building block of everything, from biblical era all the way until now. What has really changed is people's mentality on the environment. But what's most changed about that is people have taken religion out of it, and they have taken recreation out of it, and they have made it about themselves. And there's no more powerful thing than to feel that you are in danger by your surroundings, and to feel that your loved ones are endangered by your surroundings. And that is what Rachel Carson drove home so hard in such eloquent language, is that you are in danger. And it's because of us, and it can be stopped, and it can be prevented, and it needs to be stopped. And that is what was so important about Rachel Carson's book, Silent Spring. People for the first time realized they were in severe danger through chemicals and all that stuff. So, anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope that I answered some of your questions. Anyway, if you have any more questions, anything like that, drop it down in the comments box, and I promise I'll get back to you. Thank you. Thanks for watching.